Imagine, for a moment, a world where your data is not confined to one institution, where you have control over how and where your financial data is shared. Open banking is set to revolutionize innovation in the financial landscape. But what steps does Canada need to take to get to this future of finance? Our next session will dive into the future of banking, open banking. In conversation with Executive Director of Fintechs Canada, Alexander Varantzis, please welcome to the stage Vice President of External Ecosystems and Fintech Partnerships at TD Bank, Franklin Garrig, Director of Financial Services and Head of Open Banking at PwC, Abraham Tashijan, and Head of Real-Time Payments and Open Banking at Visa, Elena Litani.
Okay, there we go. All right, I normally like to start by saying something nice about the audience, but given the lighting situation here, I can't really see you all. If I could see you all, I might see a very puzzled look on your face. Talking about open banking is a bit like, it's kind of like Y2K, right? There was this big commotion about it, a lot of expectations about what it would do, and then everything just kind of fell flat and the world continued on. Open banking has felt a lot like that, right? A lot of empty promises, a lot of consultations. I can assure you, though, that that is no longer the case. Promises have been delivered on. Legislation has passed. Things are moving. There is a plan. And I'm super excited to talk to these panelists today about open banking. We have great global insights from Visa. We have a leading Canadian bank, I'd say among the most enthusiastic about open banking in Canada. And then we have I was going to say Mr. Open Banking, but there's a Mr. Open Banking, I think, in the audience. Another Mr. Open Banking in Abraham. Open banking isn't just about budgeting apps and rent reporting. If you looked at the legislation that recently passed, the scope's going to be quite broad. It's going to allow innovators to do a whole bunch of things. My question to you guys is, what are all these things that open banking is going to allow people to do?
Yeah, if I could get us started on that. The first thing I would say is, I would warn us against judging on the success of open banking based on the applications we have today. The way we've designed the open banking system and what you see in the legislation is essentially determining what informations are going to be fed into the pipes, and with that, let the industry run with it, right? Empower them with the data to actually build stuff. And so from a product perspective, the system was designed from an agnostic perspective. But look, if I'm being forced to talk about where I see the most opportunities in terms of use cases, well, first I'd look at the most boring stuff. Like imagine the last time you were trying to fill out an application for a credit card or a mortgage. And I went through a mortgage renewal recently, and it was not a 5-minute project. But just imagine open banking facilitating that process, connecting the application to an existing bank account, credit union account, or fintech, importing that stuff, and the entire form is filled. So more low-hanging fruit. In terms of bigger opportunities, I really look at the SME space. I think it's really ripe for innovation, and I think there's a lot of products that open banking can facilitate for small businesses, just simple accounting stuff and just better views of how your money is going in and out.
Yeah, to add from a global perspective, if we look at the markets which more mature in terms of market adoption and more regulatory clarity and collaboration between fintechs and banks like Europe and UK, you see many use cases like Abraham alluded to, which are not just account linking and account verification, but personal finance management, lending, and many other which are kind of evolving at this point. But I also wanted to kind of highlight this lending use case because I think in the past I've been the founder of a Canadian fintech for small businesses, spend a lot of time in small businesses, and I know how important it is for them to get access to credit. And this is right now, it's very difficult because of lack of data. And what open banking we see in Europe specifically, there's an example of NatWest Bank in UK who partnered with Tink, which is a Visa open banking solution, to enable them to streamline the digital experience for small businesses. So it's not only the financial management for small businesses and advice, but also loan origination and enabling this bank to assess better the creditworthiness of this business entity by looking not just outdated statement, but real-time data, real-time income, real-time transactional, real-time invoicing. So there's a lot of data sources. So I'm really looking forward to innovation that it could bring.
So I'm the banker here, and these use cases are both at fintechs and banks and non-banks. And first of all, I'd like to say thank you for having me. TD has been a sponsor of Elevate for quite a few years, and very excited to be here. So thank you for having me on a great topic. Use cases banks are looking at typically are account opening. It's all about friction, account opening, account funding, as well as what we call financial wellness. Help me manage my finance, help me manage my cash flow. That's aggregation plays that is usually quite helpful for consumers, customers. And then the third one is typically, and I think the most impactful one, is credit origination, which both of you mentioned. This is one that could really help customers and consumers and small businesses access to credit. But really, make no mistake, this is a transformation. This has the power to transform customer experience, consumer business experience in dealing with their fintech, with their bank, with their finances in general.
I know I opened by trying to be optimistic. I'm going to have to temper the optimism just a little bit. Though we did get legislation to get the ball rolling on open banking implementation, the machinery of government moves quite slowly. Legislation needs to pass. There's going to be more legislation tabled later this year. Hopefully, that's going to need time to pass. There's going to be an election at some point in the near future. That'll grind things to a bit of a halt before they start again. Regulations need to be drafted. The FCAC needs to stand up its own oversight capability because they were named as the regulator. A lot still needs to happen. So open banking under this new framework is still a ways away. This uncertainty about what the framework will look like and how exactly the FCAC will supervise, this doesn't help business leaders make decisions today about how to access permissioned customer data. So, what are some of the challenges, more concretely, this creates if you're operating in the market today?
Okay, I guess I could start. So given my founder experience, and also I started my career as a technologist, I think I completely agree. The unclarity is difficult to know what to do, but I think if we look at other markets, US, Europe, Australia, I think there is three things that you can do. First, think about data and data management, because you're going to have access to a lot of sensitive information. The data need to be categorized, managed, securely stored. Then second, you need to figure out, especially from fintech's perspective, but probably so from other financial institutions, how do you build the trust with your customer? Building trust comes through thinking about how do I build my system with privacy by design type of thinking, as well as transparency. I've seen some great examples like Bank of America. They showed for their customers the connections they made. So they say, hey, you've connected previously to these providers. Do you still want to, are you okay with that? Do you want to continue doing that? So I think this type of transparency helps to build trust for customers, to think about how you let a customer know why they're sharing data, who they are sharing with, and what type of data you're sharing. Is it just transactions? Is it statements? Is it more than that? So I think that builds your trust. And finally, of course, security and fraud protection, because it's not only about how you store it in data and encrypt it, but also how you access it in real time while still adhering to all the security aspects, as well as how do you have a personal security, like all the mechanisms. We've heard a lot about potential fraud and attacks which are coming, and having this access to data will become very difficult, as well as if you think about payment initiation in the future, this potentially opens up another fraud attack. So think about how you can secure your customers and keep them whole.
At TD, we're ready for open banking. We have been, our APIs have been live in the US market for a while. We have agreements with quite a few aggregators that allows data to flow. In Canada, we're working hard to get our APIs ready and flowing to the market. And so we're quite excited about embracing open banking. And the key is a safe and secure way of empowering customers to share their data. Today, it exists. Open banking exists in the absence of a regulatory framework. It exists. It is live, but it is based on customers sharing their credentials, and we feel that's not sustainable. And so we're eager to have a safe ecosystem that really can take off. And so that's why we've been prioritizing and working on providing safe API-based connectivity to our customers.
And you raise a very good point, Franklin, in terms of the market readiness, right? We often talk about fintechs perhaps getting kind of frustrated with the waiting period. But I think it's important to also highlight that I would say in my experience as the open banking lead, I never came across a stakeholder who wasn't interested in open banking, right? Who couldn't wait for this to become a reality for security purposes, for new services. So I think it's important when we look at challenges to look at it from the lens of the entire industry, be it fintech, be it credit unions, or be it banks, because the interest is all there. Now, if I'm getting a bit more specific as to what the challenge is, I'd say the biggest one is patience, perhaps. Like you said, it's taken us forever to get here. We've had, 7 years of discussions, a Senate committee hearing, a first round of consultation, second round of consultation, an advisory committee report, some guy running workshops for 2 years and a framework. It's taken us a bunch of time, right? But I think what that will amount to is, all that work that we've put in, all that's been publicized, it's been giving hints to the industry as to what's coming, right? In terms of at least the work I did, we publicized all our meetings, all the materials that went out, all the questions we asked, all the participants. So there's this glut of information on the website, the open banking implementation website. Please visit it and drive up the SEO. That you just kind of get a hint as to what's coming. And part of it was translated in the first round of legislation, and I suspect some of it will also come out in the second round eventually. So I think the biggest challenge is patience, but once the system goes live, I don't think it's going to catch anyone by surprise. And I think the benefit of that is that, as Franklin was mentioning, the industry's been building up to this, right? They've been developing this muscle memory to actually get ready to share data once we turn on the legislative switch. So although the patience may be the challenge, I think we're almost at the finish line.
Abraham, I want to follow up on one thing you said. Those consultations unearthed a bunch of information, some very specific. When this next piece of legislation is tabled, do you think it will provide all the information entrepreneurs need today to make those business decisions, or are they going to have to wait to see regulations and guidance before they know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm optimistic. I think it will. And again, I don't think it's going to catch anyone by surprise. I think in my role, what I try to do is, at least with the stakeholders, gain as much credibility as possible. And I think we did that by being very specific in the demands that we had of them, right? The questions we were asking, the time we were taking. And Franklin was part of those discussions as well. And we tried to run it in a way that was very specific and respectful of people's times. And the outputs speak for themselves. So I think those outputs, part of which have been translated in this first round of legislation that passed in May, I think are a good representation of those discussions, and I think we can continue to see something like that later in the fall.
So there's the regulatory uncertainty, but there's also a technical uncertainty. In my day job, I run basically a lobby group for Canada's fintech scene, and one thing I hear about a lot is, when the rules are said and done, how technically am I going to get data in and out? Right now, there's emerged this ecosystem of aggregators, pipes cobbled together to screen scrape. Is all that going to go away when we have this framework? What's the future going to look like more technically?
And maybe that's the benefit of being not the first out of the gate. We all know what the industry structure will be, and the components are known. It's about API, safe connectivity, avoiding to share your credentials. It's about a standard. In North America, we have FDX that reach 94 million consumers sharing their credentials, so sharing their data through APIs, and so that's a significant standard that we expect would be anointed by both governments in the US and Canada. And then you have typically a contract and a contract that lays out the liability aspect of the relationship between a provider and a recipient. And so these are the components we all expect to have. And an accreditation, which allows who is in, or that kind of helps guide who is in the ecosystem, or so that the ecosystem be safe overall. So these components are well known. The regulation may assess and intends to pick a standard in the industry, and then intends to create the accreditation process and the contracting process and making it a common rule. So these are the uncertainties, but the basics are there, the components of a contract are there, the way to connect are there. And you're asking the question of what will be the industry structure? Will there be intermediaries or not? Look at other markets, and I'm sure you can talk to it, Elena. There is, in other markets that have been open in open banking, even with a very strong government hand, there is still quite a few aggregators and intermediaries playing in the market. So I'd be surprised if Canada is different. I think we'll keep a lot of players to help fintechs, help small organizations connect and get access to the market.
Yeah, I agree with your point. So when you look at Europe, for example, there's several aggregators. Each of them has different capabilities, potentially somewhat similar or somewhat different connectivity, right? But all those three components you mentioned, like API standards, are really, really important. I would answer it slightly differently. So I think, like, yes, there is a possibility to connect in directly, and if you want the ultimate control, that's probably what you will be considering doing, right? But having an aggregator has a benefit because it's speed to market usually, because you have multiple connections. Like think the one I mentioned in Europe, there is over 2,000 connections to different banks. Building yourself will take time, right? So, and then on top of it, you usually have a bit of out-of-the-box type of compliance and security, because they establish kind of mechanism how you connect to APIs, how you pass secure like a case, and etc. And then finally, they usually provide some kind of overlay services. And that's where I think a differentiation may come in the future, because you see some of them leaning towards like a type of personal finance management, like you guys mentioned, or maybe credit origination, like we've talked about. And so there is, I think there is, we'll see, it's hard to predict, but I also think that there's going to be probably multiple variations of how you, what partner you choose to partner with, and to build your solution.
Yeah. Now, I think legislation is going to be really a boon to these intermediaries that help financial institutions, fintechs, and credit unions connect with one another and to exchange data. Because I think what the legislation does is it provides some clarity as to what the rules of the game are. And if you're a business, the last thing you want to do is play in a space where you don't know the rules. If they're ad hoc, if they're unstable, if they're not clear. So I think with our open banking legislation, what we'll have is an opportunity for newcomers in the space. We've got a, I would say, relatively mature ecosystem of intermediaries, both American companies, Canadian national champions here that are serving the market. But I think with our open banking legislation around the corner, it might entice those from other jurisdictions that have kind of beaten us to the punch, like the UK or even Australia, to pay attention to Canada, right? To see that regulatory clarity, to see the direction that the country is going in, and actually invest to bring their product propositions here. And at the end of that competition, will serve the industry.
I want you all to answer this one. Based on what we've seen elsewhere, specifically in countries like Canada, so not a big financial inclusion problem, relatively banked population, pretty sticky banking relationships. What should we expect the headlines in Canada to say once this open banking framework has come into force, people are sharing data via APIs? What should the headlines say, let's say 4 or 5 years after this is done?
I'll be a bit pessimistic here. I think in the first year, what we'll probably see are a bit of stumbles out of the gate, right? Teething pains, because fundamentally, this is a new way for Canadian consumers and SMEs to share data. So I think it'd be naive for us to think that coming out of the gates, this is going to be perfect. I think looking beyond that, the best case scenario would be not to hear about open banking at all. Because I don't think consumers genuinely care about the term. The only people that do are people like us here on stage, like you in the crowd, and government officials as well. But I think what consumers care about are the capabilities that open banking enables. So I think it would be a success for us looking at 3, 4 years down the road to actually stop talking about open banking and enjoying the benefits that are out there as a consumer.
Yeah. I think Alex has lost hope, actually. He's talking about 4 or 5 years. He's not even talking about next year. Or And so I think we will be, I hope, like we're like old friends talking, we've been working on this file for so many years. I think in a few years we'll be past that. The focus will be on the opportunity, not the regulation, not how we build the plumbing, but rather what are we doing with it. And I think this is a whole new world that's opening up. You augment open banking with AI, which is also making a lot of progress. The possibilities are endless, and it's actually very exciting. So I think that will be the topic in these circles, and I look forward to it. And I'm hoping it's not 4 or 5 years away.
Completely agree, Franklin and Abraham. I do think, I hope, and being an optimist, I hope in a year, when the open banking launches in 12 months from there, we'll see some headlines about, well, new opportunity unlocked, innovation coming, this use case. Being part of Visa and our mission is to be best and for consumers on how to pay and be paid. I think for me, the next evolution is definitely around payment initiation. I think when we see other markets there, that's where actually there is a lot of value and a lot of unlock, including pay by bank, account payments, bill payments. So I really hope that this is where evolution takes us in Canada. And with that, I think it will unlock tremendous amount of new use cases, as well as GDP growth, because we need it, right? We kind of flattened out this month.
Elena, Franklin, Abraham, thank you so much for your insights. To the audience I cannot see, thank you. I'm sure you did a stellar job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.